necessarily, but
well, a little bit, like just the kind of
Oh, okay,
awakening you
yeah,
to
okay.
God's, like, you already are someplace, and you already are in a sphere of influence, and perhaps this awakens you to, like, I may not need to go find something as much as it's already there, I just don't recognize it. I think that's what you're hitting on a little bit. Yeah.
Let's see. Yeah, an opportunity here, and it's not as much a negative because I have begun doing it, but I want to make sure that it's clear to the leaders that that there's consistent encouragement. I said leaders, hosts, or for whoever's facilitating the group, like whoever steps into that kind of natural thing, to be asking the question after we watch a video. Sometimes the video naturally pushes you toward this, but when it doesn't, if you're talking about forgiveness in the context of a small group, for somebody to be constantly going, in light of this, how does this affect how we communicate or represent the gospel in our world? You know what I mean? To where we don't want every lesson just saying, go out and represent the gospel, because people need to work on some of the intimacy things and the internal things, but we do want it to be a constant environment where people are going, in light of this, how does this affect me? Some people sitting there will go, it doesn't, based on what we just talked about, but at least it's brought up, and people can learn from that.
Go ahead, Mike, if you want to.
So on missional behavior for presence, as we already mentioned, groups participate in a variety of service opportunities, which, so just service ops, I guess, is a way that it puts people in contact with others of various faith perspectives. So those that do projects, it's an opportunity for them to be present in the moment, and also, depending on what it is, potentially develop. I think of a nursing home. You go into a nursing home, and usually people get involved because they have someone there already, like there's a mom there or an aunt or something like that. And then, of course, they meet other people. And sometimes people's hearts get broken for those individuals who have nobody coming, so it may develop an opportunity for them to be present in that context. Also, let's see, the entire purpose of the groups is for them to be provoked to be intentional out there. So that is why these groups exist, so that people are provoked to go out there, wherever out there is, and be intentional about being present. There's also, as I mentioned before, the opportunity for presence within the group, because we hope that there are people of varying faith perspectives and places on their journey who are actually showing up at these. So it's a great actual place for presence. As hard as we would try to really get close to someone who works at a store, they got people they're trying to take care of as well. So having an opportunity for a place to actually have discussions good. Negative here, I would like to see more non-church neighbors and friends actually attending the groups. Again, I do hear that it happens, but I just don't know how much. I don't think I'll be able to know totally how much, but definitely the opportunity is increased communication about that. That's probably something that I could, though, add on this. I do a survey twice a year to the host to kind of just find out what the state of their group is. Do they have capacity? Are they full? What projects do they do? That's probably one that could go on there. Like, what's the makeup of your group? People from other places, things like that. I have a note for that. Proclamation provides multiple avenues for gospel proclamation in both the meetings and the service ops. It's really the same thing as the top part there. In the service opportunities, specific, I'll just kind of stick with the ones that we've mentioned. I mean, obviously you're going, and if there's a more pressing thing to talk about in a nursing home or hospital than eternal issues, I don't know what it is. That's kind of the natural thing that they want to talk about, that you want to talk about. At the mission, typically there will be aspects of kind of serving other people, but for sure, when we went to the Niagara one, for sure, what they wanted was us to interact with the people and share with them and talk with them. And it wasn't dictated like, here's what we presume the plan of salvation to be, and here's how we want you to say it to them. It was just, hey, care about them, share with them. So it gives opportunity for proclamation there. But again, this may happen in projects, but the hope, and internally, but the hope is that it's provoking them back in their lives. And that's not measurable, to my knowledge, other than by our church-wide survey when people are self-identifying how many people they're communicating to. You know what I mean? I don't really know how else to measure if people are talking about the gospel. Again, an opportunity within proclamation is developing tools and training for defining and giving ideas about it specifically with our language. I think that's something for sure that we need to do. I mean, you know, there's lots of stuff out there about, you know, evangelism, but for me, you may know of some really good stuff. A lot of what I see is either one extreme or the other. A lot of it is kind of just focused on the decision, you know what I mean? Kind of here's how to bring people to the point of prayer, which, you know, is good for what it's worth. I just don't think it's as whole as we would like it to be. And for those people who are good at that and gifted at that, they're all over that, but the other people just feel like, crap, yeah, I'm not good at evangelism, kind of thing. So just maybe to either find something good or develop something internally that uses our language on what do we mean when we say that. Then saturation. Saturation is what we hope happens when individuals consistently, this is long, represent the gospel in their individual circles, and when groups within geographies are consistently thinking this way. So here's the negative that goes with that opportunity, or I need to pay closer attention to where our groups are. I actually printed this so that I can show you. I haven't looked at this in a while. Let me see. I'll take this down in a moment.
Sure.
So this is where our current 83 groups kind of exist. You know, the furthest south one is in Holland. I don't even know where that is, except for there. What's that?
My parents are out there.
Oh, is that it?
Yeah.
So that's the furthest one down. And then
Gold
we've got
star.
a couple here.
I'm not saying it's
here.
my parents'
Your
fault.
mom lives
Yeah.
Your mom. Your mom. But being able to look at this, at first, like your mind could go, okay, we just need to start groups in some of these empty areas. But there's really, it's more complicated than that because we have people who live out here who attend these groups. So part of it is figuring out how can I communicate, because just because there would be orange dots everywhere would not necessarily mean that there was gospel saturation. So part of what we have to figure out is how can we either find out how many people are driving kind of past each other to connect in these groups, or just begin going, okay, here's a way to start. We've got nothing going on in Lewiston. So send an email to everyone who's in groups and say, hey, you've heard us talk about these circles. We would love to see some kind of activity going on from a circle group perspective in this area. Do any of you live there and you're already in a group and you're going somewhere else? We would love to talk to you about potentially hosting one at your house. And that may be immediately, like we may get 5 people who say, yeah, we'd really like to do that. Or we might get somebody to say, hey, I'm willing, and I put them on a list so that the next time John hears from someone from Lewiston, I don't have to have them drive to Niagara Falls to get involved in a group. Now again, it's not a slam dunk like this equals saturation. But when we look at trying to make sure that the gospel is pressed into all these areas, like we mentioned before, if people did live within just a small little radius, the likelihood of them speaking the same language, talking about the same opportunities, doing stuff outside of the group time is going to be higher. So it's not easy to figure out how to do all this. But again, I put it on the negative side as an opportunity because I've kind of neglected this to a degree, and it's something that obviously now that I'm going to be spending some time
Yes. Just a quick comment. Like this is in the national network. This has become a much sooner part of strategy than what we would say happens here. and it's not an indictment, it's not a judgment, but especially with smaller churches, and I know we're not a smaller church, but one of the things that they kind of get to first is visually, what is it that is going on? And Mike hit on this a couple of weeks ago. Like if we had a church that started for the first time, what would we focus on? If you stripped away, we have this dearth of ministries. In the reality of a church planter or a new expression of the church, it's small groups. It's like we can do Sunday, and then we need people to be engaged in formation in small groups. That's typically the leanest way to go about doing this. And so this is just, if anybody ever wanted to do this with the placement of their people, just know that this literally takes seconds. We could easily do that to help you. I know some ministries have inquired about this. And I do think that when you start looking at things visually, perhaps maybe it reveals some things to you in terms of your strategy. So just something to consider.
Yeah, and just in general about saturation, we're aware that it requires kind of hub plants, whatever that is, whether it's a church plant or campus or partnership with someone else. For gospel saturation, I drew the little arrows here. This is where the chapel is. We can only do this so far alone, right? So we have to have partnerships, other hubs that are kind of shooting out groups, whatever that looks like, whatever name they go by, and then those groups provoking people. And again, not like we're training soldiers to all be the same and say the same things everywhere, not that, but just to get people to realize, man, you have gifts, you have an incredible message, and it's uniquely expressed in you, and where you are placed is the place where you're intended to represent it in that way. Just those concepts of kind of freeing people from the mindset that they have to be like so-and-so, or they have to be in this particular, use this tool or be in this group. You don't have to. You have to use some tool, right? You have to use something, but we just want to provoke people to that mindset. So these kind of things are things that I need to spend more time on, and I'll be able to, obviously now with John. It's all about John.
And let's be honest, if your office is full of maps like that, how cool does that look? It's great propaganda. We've got Blitzkrieg going in northern Niagara. I'll shut up.
All right, so conversion, positive, it leads people to greater understanding of the gospel for those who are part and for those who they influence. And the hope is that it leads to conversion in all as they seek to follow Jesus. Conversions, when does it happen? I think all of us in here would agree when the moment is different for everyone, right? When that time is. Sometimes it's when we first hear, sometimes it's 5 years later and something dawns on us or whatever, but our hope is that it leads to conversion in all. I don't have any way of measuring decisions independently of what the chapel, kind of like the moment decisions, other than what the chapel, the survey asks for that specifically. Now again, I mentioned to keep in mind that this is all small groups, and you remember with our survey, what we realized is that people engaged in service and small groups were however many percentage points more likely to be engaged in these activities. Mm-hmm. So just by the nature of being in a group, we don't even know which ones provoke the most. We don't have a really way to measure that. We just know that if you're not just sitting in rows, but you're gathered with other people, you're more likely to engage in this kind of behavior. And that's all that we're talking about here. So it is more likely that there would be more information here just by the nature of it's limited to just small groups that provoke you to service. You know what I mean? So that's it. Thoughts, questions, ideas?
Yeah, Mike, the piece on presence, the opportunity I've noted around more non-church neighbors and friends, and I'm just curious what your initial thoughts are on how do you accomplish something like that? How realistic is it to have those who are non-church pulled into a group like that? Are they going to feel comfortable? Is that what most people that would be considered non-church be interested in doing, or is it better or more effective for us to try and do that relationship by relationship as opposed to saying, okay, I want to have 4 of my neighbors come on over and we're going to host a Bible study, but we're not going to make it seem like a Bible,
Yeah, Man, my mind just went all over the place when you're asking that. Yes, relationship by relationship is way better than inviting someone kind of cold into a group. But my mind went to all different kind of things. One of the things was, why is our language so different that we have to be so different when those kind of people are around? You know what I mean? And like,
We're just fellowshipping.
well, yeah, that kind of stuff.
We're gonna
that's
break some
one
bread
piece.
as we fellowship.
Like that's one piece, right? Like, and you have people who are bold and they don't care. They'll talk about it. And there's a good part of that. Like, God is who He is to them, no matter who's around. But when I have coffee with those guys in the coffee shop, the way you're saying it,
I love the blood of the lamb
it's
too.
exactly.
I just
It's freaking
it's
me
a
out.
little
I know it's
freaky.
gonna freak them out. But I also know that there's a good part of that, right? And so I think.
You guys need to get saved.
In fact, my dad is here. Come on, Dad.
Lead everybody to Christ.
Your righteousness is like nothing.
So that's one piece, just like in theory, and I know it's not totally reality, but I would love to know that in the way that I talk about God, and like with my family, I do this. I say, hey guys, when we say this, I know what we mean, but I wonder if we could just kind of change the terms a little bit and talk like this. And that's like when they are not here. You know what I mean? Like, this is how we describe this, and we're saying the same thing, because the gospel's good news for everyone, right? I mean, we're going to say it to them eventually in words that make sense, so why don't we talk about it in those ways? And so it doesn't mean that there's never a need for translation, but that's one of the things that pops up. Another thing is, you know, if the relationship happens first, and again, I want to be clear that I'm not saying be nice to people so you can get them with the gospel kind of thing. You know what I mean? The relationship could be enough. This is Mike talking, right? Like, I don't develop relationship with the people across the street at Starbucks just so, and sorry about the intentional relationships, but just so I can like trick them with the gospel one day, right? I talk about whatever we're talking about. And it is my hope that I can, because of what the gospel has done in my life, serve them well and be maybe something that they need for me to be. And if the opportunity, and whatever those opportunities are, I want to be able to fill that. If they're hungry, I want to feed them. If what they need is to hear me talk about my doctrinal beliefs, then I'm totally willing to do that.
And I was just gonna, I think you're right on. I mean, I think that like even when it comes to just meeting needs of the least of these, Jesus made it very clear you do it because of who you are. And absolutely, you hope to share the gospel, but at the same time, Jesus said just do it. And so even in our relationships, but the beautiful thing about that is because I am that guy that would be the horrible evangelist. But when you begin to really love somebody that you've gotten to know, and you really believe the gospel is true, then you start to go, why are they living their lives without this? And then this conversation becomes one of you love them so much. There are going to be awkward conversations with sharing the gospel, and that's there's going to be times you're on a plane with somebody and you know this is it. I get one shot, and I don't care if it's awkward or not, and they need to hear this. But there's other times where I've talked some about our neighbor, and I'm coming to a place now where I'm like, I don't want him to keep living the rest of his life not knowing what he can be connected to. And so then it becomes a real burden, and you just and our relationship really it became a relationship, and I'm going to hang out with him because he's lonely, just because he's lonely.
Absolutely.
And I'll share the gospel, but if he doesn't respond, I'm not going to stop hanging out with him.
Absolutely.
But that's kind of my point, though. That's being done relationship by relationship. The goal isn't about, okay, well, I want all of my non-churched friends to come into my circle group that I happen to host.
In fact, I never talk about like non-church and that kind of stuff. It's just people.
Right.
I do say your neighbors, your friends, they don't have to go to the chapel. Like, I do qualify it that way. But I'm with you, man. And that's why I say our hope is that mostly it provokes you to go back, right? But the opportunity is a great opportunity. Like, if you're going to invite to anything, it's low key, right? It's not church. It is church, but to them it's not church. You know what I mean? So it is a lower opportunity. But I agree, it's not the first thing I'm going to do, for sure. But again, pursuing, I think how your group goes is important too. Because like, if you're in a group and they're all like hyper, like they can't stand it, like the most important thing to them is that you can check off a few boxes in a doctrinal list. That's probably not the group you want to invite people who are not sure to.
Yeah, real quick, I want to be sensitive. It's about 11:05, so if you want to go, you're more than welcome to go. If you have other, I think one thing that just an observation is in my own life and something I've seen in my wife's group is I think there's like sometimes we're unaware that when an unbeliever is in our midst in a group like this, there is a tendency for us to get anxious about the uncertainty of what are we supposed to do? Should we act different? Should we, you know? And it's Dwight talks about be do, and I personally have become more consciously aware in my own life, like wow, I get more anxious around an unbeliever, and I'm not exactly sure why that is. What is it? And some of it is my nomenclature. Like I'm worried about what language comes. Like am I just speaking another language to them?
Sure.
And it's only been recently that I've kind of started to understand this in my own life. Like, just be who I am, have some confidence that the gospel has changed me, and I do live with an intentional hope that because my life hopefully looks different, it begs a question, and I am not ashamed to say why. You know, that there's no, and from what I've gathered, some of the e-groups that I've been talked to about, that there's sort of a natural comfortability with that because there is more of a regular rhythm of unbelievers coming around and just be who you are, and you know maybe we could learn from that. You know, so this is a thought.
That's good on language because you know being nervous if because we could tend to think, okay, it's my responsibility. This person's in front of me. What I say is going to make or break kind of the deal for them. And so I was going to say, do you guys ever wonder if there's really a God? But now that he's here, I'm not going to, kind of thing.
Yeah.
But why? You know what I mean? I mean, we always should temper our language. But, you know, if we can get to a place where we're equally comfortable going, yeah, there's actually no way to finally prove God exists. Like, indefinitely, like to where there's no question, right? So we all have our reasons why we believe that, and I do. So, but I think that being honest that way helps people to be able to go, oh, okay, then why do you believe? And then I can
Well, I'll
give
tell
my
you
answers,
why.
you can give yours, you know what I mean? So,
Right. No, that's a good point.
right?
Other questions, other thoughts or comments?
I just have one. Mike, you know, man, I totally understand with the host thing, the nightmare of trying to get all that. How much, as I try to understand what you guys do, how much of this at this end is tied to that person?
As far as responsibility?
Yeah, sorry, and just as you picture it, you know, not in responsibility, but and also in actuality, as it rolls.
My hope is that the more we can get people involved in communication, whether it's Facebook or email, I want to communicate with everyone involved rather than just the hosts. I have all of their email addresses, so they get things and I say forward them. You're in a group. I don't know if you've ever been forwarded on some of that information or not.
Yes, I am. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, you know what I mean?
Right.
And regardless, I understand. Some people just, you know, they forget or whatever. So my hope is that it really does become what the host does is they have it at their house. And that's it. You know what I mean? To where I'm communicating to people in these groups. So it's less, like, for instance, this is night and day different from what we do on the family ministry side. Like, high, you know, especially as they get in the older level. Well, that's not true. It's all the way across the board. Background checks and who knows this person,
Right.
and we're not just having anybody in here, and that's going to be that way. And you know, if it needs to get tighter, it can. We realize that these are less about what the chapel's doing in people's houses, and more. And I say this to people when the groups are starting. It's different people going, hey, we hear what the chapel's saying about gospel representation, every man, woman, and child. We want to meet other people who want to gather around those things, and we initiate those relationships, and I'm a resource to them to help them accomplish that. So it's less about an intentional structure to where we're getting everybody to think the same way, and more about a broad communication to the body at large about these kind of things that we want to have.
So your host is only a point person for information. They don't actually drive the group. They don't do anything.
From what we require. reality for most people is most of the hosts do drive the group. Partially because we used to be kind of more on the leader side,
Right.
and people are just doing what they get used to. We haven't pushed, like you guys haven't heard us promote circle groups or even Lifelinks in the past year since I've been working with it. We've just been figuring it all out and where are we going and what's currently happening. We will begin to make it available more readily. And so again, because we're not just placing, I would say fairly soon, most of the groups will be new groups that have never known anything different. You know what I mean? Because it's very possible for us to double the number of groups fairly easily with the number of people that we have. So then you're dealing less with, I mean, everybody still brings their stuff, right? If they've been a leader before,
Sure, right.
or even just their philosophy on how much to control doctrine type thing. And that varies. And again, no, I'm totally open for those discussions. You know, I'm kind of doing this and figuring it all out. I would not have always been comfortable with this. But yeah, it is true that what the hope is they open their house and they get communication. They are not individually responsible for making sure these things are happening. If there's a responsibility at this point, it falls on me to promote these concepts to everyone who's involved. But like when it hits the road, like the guy sitting in the group at the house, if he hears anything, he's going to hear this stuff. But he's not spending his days thinking about these categorizations, right? We're just hoping that at the end of it, he is going, wow, as a result of that, I want to be Jesus at work. You know what I mean? Not, am I building the intentional relationship necessarily? He just knows that's what he should do. It's the natural overflow type thing. Anything
Good
else?
stuff, man. Thanks for walking us through. If anybody's got any questions, feel free to chime in. But man, thank you. This is really good. Really good.
Cool.